Everyone knows the typical USPCC dating code system. One letter followed by four numbers. Older decks look even more confusing. Is there a method to this madness? I think I may have the answer to that. There are a few sites that collectors go to in order to figure out the year their deck was made. LeeAsher.com and BicycleCards.org, which is Joe Pearson's site. On my site, I have a YouTube video that I did that takes dating a few steps further. Tax stamps, seals, zip codes, postal zones, etc. These all help with the standard A1234 type codes. But what about a deck with a different code? So these codes here don't follow the standard that we all know. But what do these mean? Well, I think I've figured that out. There are a lot of different versions, but they all end up meaning the same thing. And in this video, this is what I'm going to show you how to do and how I figured it out over the course of a few months with the help of some friends. So let's get right into it right now. So this whole project started one day while I was sitting on lunch break at work. And I was trying to come up with something like a story or something for either Clear the Decks or Card Culture. And I talked to Lee Asher about it a little bit. He said, well, he goes, it'll come to you. Well, this was that day. So I got to thinking, why are these codes all different? Do they even mean anything? So I started with every ace of spades that I had. I started writing every one of them down, just, one after another. The name of it, the copyright date, and this code. And after about 15 to 20 decks in, I started noticing patterns. And when I did, it clicked. Now, I'll take you through these, a few examples at a time with different cards and kind of show you what they mean. Now, I compiled a lot of data over 3 months, maybe, with the help of some collector friends. Matt Schacht, Colin Brady, Toby Edwards, Glenn Curry. I sourced images from eBay and other for sale sites, even Facebook Marketplace, if they had the Ace of Spades on there. Or I would ask people directly, even if they had cards by other makers. Some later, I think NYCC or Doherty or even Samuel Hart, they all follow a similar code. So I, I, I know I have it. There are some anomalies, especially in 1903, which I'll get into that here also. But for the most part, um, it breaks down kind of what you would expect almost. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. I didn't realize that it would have been, that obvious, if you will. It's almost kind of hiding in plain sight. I did find out later on bicyclecards.org, which is Joseph Pearson's site, that one of the theories that Lee Asher proposed to me, and it's one of those things, is Occam's razor. It's um, the simplest answer is typically the right one. I believe is how that goes. So Joe Pearson had the theory already out there on his site, which I didn't find until just recently. Lee Asher proposed to it. That one to me too. I sourced it through a few friends, and they are in agreement. And the following examples will show you what these mean and how we can date these codes. Okay, so we'll start with this Ace of Spades right here. This is a Hockman US6F, and this is from the deck design called Jerry, copyright 1907. Okay, so let's look at the date code, 8-7-408. Okay, so the date code breaks down like this. I'll just go straight into it. 8 is the month, August. 7 is the year, 1907. 408, that's the tricky part, and that's where the theory comes in by Joe Pearson, Lee Asher, and now myself and the agreement of a few other collectors. That 408 is a production or line or machine or quality control number. You can insert whichever one you want there. So it kind of breaks down like this. So the key to all of it was this card right here, which isn't really included in a lot of the wide backs, or at least if they were, they've been thrown away. So this is a guarantee card. So should there be a defect in this pack, we'll be pleased to replace it. Now, some of the newer ones will say return the defective deck or the card that's bad with the ace of spades. Now, why do they want the ace of spades? Okay, that's where the code is. So that's where this 408 and all these other ones later I'll show you. The line or quality control number, when they send that defective card back, they can pinpoint the machine, when it was made, and detect an error, detect a printing error of some kind, where they can go back and they can correct it. And I think that is, it makes the most sense. And like I said, a lot of collectors are in agreement with it. So you send back the defective card, they can say, why was this defective? Let's go back and look at the machine or the print run and identify the error and fix it. And that is how those numbers correspond to these date codes. It tells you what month, what year, and which machine it was printed on so that they can go back and correct any errors made with a bad print run. So this is a sample of my date code project spreadsheet. So I can't fit all roughly 600 of these on here, so this is what we're going with, the first several. So you look at 1776, the first deck, copyright year 1912. Now the date code is 12/11/114Z. So there's a lot of Z's in a lot of these production codes. It has nothing to do with the year, and that's where some collectors or people trying to sell their decks that look at the basic chart get it wrong. Not everybody, but a few. So this would be December 1911, production run 114Z. So why is it 1911 if the copyright is 1912? So that's where I had to do a kind of a little deductive reasoning, I guess. So I think what happened is, with the case of this ace, it was printed, and then the next year, when they had new back designs, they would put the card back onto the card face. Just like in 1965, roughly, when they started prefacing decks. They'd print all the faces first, add backs later. I think that practice actually stemmed 50 years before. And that's where I think this comes into play. So is this deck technically 1911 or is it 1912? So you could go either way. It was printed in 1911, but the back was printed in 1912. So we would probably still go with 1912. Or you could go at 1911. It's a little weird. So we'll skip ahead to the next one, next 1776. This one is 11/13/124Z. Now there's a dash between 124 and Z. I don't think it makes any difference. I think that's just the way they printed it. So this would be November 1913. Now this is a very good example here. This really helps us because now we know that this deck 1776 was printed more than 1 year. Now we've got a 2-year print run, which means instead of, if they made 50,000 decks the first year, now we could have a potential another 50,000. So now we have 100,000 decks printed. So, and that's when we'll get into a whole discussion about rarity when over multiple print runs. That's a whole different story. Okay, now here's another one. You look down to the next one, a dead heat. Now this one I have had conversations with some collectors, or a collector. where they represented this deck as 1893. Now, when you look on the card back, I don't have an example of it in front of me. It says image copyrighted 1893 by it was a German company or whatever. So you have two codes here. You have 87408, August 1907. Now you couple that with a US 6F ace, that lines up. No problems there. Now the next one is 10394Z. So line production quality control number 94Z. It's a US 6F also, but the 10 and the 3 seem backward. Now this is an anomaly, and I believe it is 1910. Well, it can't be 1910 because the US 6F ace wasn't made 1910. But it can't be 3 because the US 6F wasn't made until the very tail end of 1904. And I think that was actually for 1905 decks. I'll have to go back and check that out. So this one is an anomaly. So, okay. We'll go to Airedale. 1-20-CA 421. Okay, so the 20, okay, so January 1920, copyright year 1920, that lines up. CA 421. Now the A in this case is your date code of 1920, which also matches the 20 in this code. The C, it shows up in this time frame too, from about 1914, which will say CT, all the way up to early 20s, or maybe it stops at 1920. But at any rate, the C really doesn't matter in this case. The A does. And that's where we get 1920. Same as the next one down, 10-20, October 1920. And now we got one where there's a code on the Joker, A91. Again, A1920. I don't remember which deck this came with. I think it was the one marked 1020. Not sure what the 91 means on that. Joker codes are going to have, some of those might take a little more investigation if we can figure it out. Where I started learning the patterns was with this one, Alt Heidelberg, 1913, 113, 121Z. I saw that code pop up like crazy. January 1913, production 121Z. So that was good. And we will keep going with the next one. So going through the list again, at Alt Heidelberg, you have 315 U 447, makes it a little simpler. U and 15 are both 1915. The Joker CU, again, ignore the C, U 1915. Same thing with the next two. Let's scroll down to Anticipation. Now this one has a matching Joker. For some of them, and then obviously the later years they don't have them. So Anticipation, copyright 1902. We have the E127, pretty self-explanatory. E is 1902. 127, again, probably the machine or line number or print run it came off of. And then this is a multi-year print run. So 1903 you have F, 1904 February 1904. But then you got the Joker G26. Now this is where the original chart started with G in 1904. Prime example. G26, the Joker is 1904. Then you get to 1906, 86-0372. August 1906, and then another run in 1907 in June of that year. So Anticipation runs at least a 5-year period, or 6 print runs, 1902 through 1907. So, and we will see that with the big one here at C, all the way at the bottom there. There's only a few there, so I'll kind of go through them. So the copyright is 1905, starts out with 95347. There we go right there, no problem, 1905. The Joker, for one of these, K591, K being 1907. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Once you start seeing the patterns, it's very self-explanatory. It really is simpler than you think. It's just that a couple of people longtime collectors, have kind of looked at it, but never, maybe it was too daunting. Back then, I mean, the internet wasn't around. I mean, I'm sure you could plug the stuff into basic databases back then. Probably not spreadsheets. I don't know when Excel came out. Um, so they didn't really put much stock into it. Maybe nobody cared, maybe nobody bothered to care, I guess. Um, it's just one of those things that grabbed my attention and said, let's figure it out. So, like I said, there is an anomaly in 1903, and I believe I know how that one goes. Okay, so this is a US 6E Ace of Spades. This one, the last use was 1904. So, this one says 3-9-K, which if you look at the standard codes, okay, the standard numbering system, month, year, line number, this would tell you that it's probably made 1909, March 1909 actually. That's not the case with this one. And I don't know why they did it different in 1903. Who knows? But this is actually 1903 September, and most likely machine or line K. That's like I said, some of this is speculation, but with enough examples, I think it's a very plausible, solid theory. So 1903 September, and you see the copyright 1903. So it can't be older than that, obviously. Otherwise, it'd be a 2 there or whatever, or a different letter. So this would not be 1907K because it has a matching joker, and matching jokers ended in 1904. Now, there's a separate thing with matching jokers that I've noticed. Anything printed in 1904 as a new run, capital joker. I saw like I showed you the anticipation, the joker with the G26. That joker was 1904, but that was one of the older print runs, so it had been around for a while. So I think they just continued on. Or it ended early in 1904, and then when they had the new batch, the new back designs coming out that year, they switched to the capital joker. So as far as for new decks, matching jokers probably ended in 1903. That's a separate thing. So 1903 is an anomaly. Again, don't know why they did it that way. But that's how, when you see a copyright 1903 and you see the 3 listed first, it's year, month, production. So this one is Harbor, US 6G. We found copyright of 1921. I think it's 1920. There's no definitive copyright date on this back design. But this one's pretty self-explanatory, January 1922. Wides ended in 1924. And I think for that one they used the actual letter code of F, which that also ran concurrent on bridge-sized decks of that time period too. So you see a date like this, 22, that's your year. Okay, so now we're going to look at a US 6E Ace. This is from Moon Fairy. Moon Fairy was copyrighted 1899. Now, when you look at the copyright date on this, you're going to automatically assume that this ace was made in 1899. That's not the case. Look at F34. So F is going to be 1903. So when you see somebody representing this deck as 1899, they're going by the copyright date. But you look at your handy dandy chart, F 1903. Now, this deck, I made a mistake. Well, I shouldn't say mistake. I just didn't. Okay, I didn't pay attention, so I guess it was a mistake. A few years ago, I went to a cardistry jam here in town, and I used this deck for cardistry, and I represented it as 1899, not really paying attention to the date code, which I should have done. And I did that on another deck too. I said 1899. I think the date was actually 1900. So I mean, we all make mistakes. So yes. So even though it says copyright 1899, this one is actually 1903. So now we'll go over to a little bit older one. This is US 6C. This is a George Washington portrait, and you can see copyright 1901 right there in the lower center. But if you look down to the bottom and just to the left, you're going to see D35. Well, if you get your chart out, D is 1901. So this is a case where the copyright and the date code match. Now, there are some of these that do not have this type of little date code at the bottom, yet it'll say copyright 1900, 1901, so on and so forth. So what do you do then? How do you date this deck? You would go to the Joker. So this is from Rookwood. The Ace of Spades on this particular deck does not have a date code. But look at the Joker, C37. Now, Rookwood is copyrighted 1899. Now, there are a few different versions of Rookwood. There is a borderless Rookwood, and then you have bordered ones that follow that. And then in 1907, at the bottom left of the card back, the name Rookwood is there. So there's 3 different examples. So this one is version 2, if you will. So you might see on the Ace copyright 1899, no date code. Okay, we'll run with it. Well, 1899 would be B. The only B codes you're going to find on Congress decks are the lacquer backs, and I believe there are 5 of them. And they're all in the Joker. They all say B. I think B40 actually. I think they're all the exact same code. But we're not going to show those in this video. So this Rookwood is C. That's 1900. Okay, so that's all the examples I want to show you today. So hopefully you gain a little insight. Now, I know I've been on social media a lot, Facebook. I've kind of hinted around a little bit, and I wanted to kind of keep some of it to me until I made this video. But I think for the most part, collectors have figured it out. So for the most part, you've got your month, your year, and your production or quality control line, number, whatever. Like I said, that's the theory. That is the leading theory and seems to be the simplest answer, especially when you combine it with the guarantee card when you have to send it as a defective deck or card back or whatever, along with the Ace of Spades. Then they can look at the Ace of Spades and see, okay, that came from line number 114Z or whatever. So, like I said, this took a few months of prep, lots and lots and lots of editing, just lots of compilation, lots of back and forth with my fellow friends who also collect these and, may or may not want to know exactly how old they are. I saw an issue, and for some reason, I was able to figure it out pretty quick. And I think anybody can do that, but I don't think anybody wanted to take it on. So when you have an old deck like that, and you see it on eBay or something, people reach out to me. You can always reach out to me, not a problem. Or now that you have this information, there you go. You can date these decks by yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I presented this in a understandable fashion, for lack of a better term. Hopefully I wasn't all over the map. It's really not as complicated as it looks. And I hope that this gave you some insight. into deciphering these codes. And I thank you for the time, and please give me a like, follow, share this video, um, and we'll look to see you on the next one.